Welcome back to episode 5 of the Gray Area podcast. We're excited to see all the views and love we're getting on all the podcast episodes so far. We want to make better content for you guys, so continue to run up the like button, subscribe, and please comment on our videos as it helps us decide what to talk about. Today we have our friend Rhett. He's our next guest on the podcast here, and he will be talking about his political views and how society should work, I guess, from his point of view. So, Rhett, why don't you take it away and give us a little intro?
All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Rhett Raymond. I am a senior at Vanguard University. And for my senior class, what you laughing about there, Christian?
Just keep going.
Okay. So anyway, I wrote a paper for my capstone class, and it was basically on your own personal philosophy and what you think you grew in the most over the semester. Can I help you?
I'm sorry. Keep going.
The three main areas that I focused on were what I believe becomes of the concept of power. The second section is about the role of the people in a free society, and the third on who were like my thoughts on who I thought should rule in a society.
No, what's so funny? I'm sorry.
You just
keep going. It's fine.
Okay. So basically, I started off the whole thought process with the philosophers that I kind of focused on. You guys suck.
I don't know why. I'm sorry.
It's me. I'm trying not to laugh, and like I can see Connor trying not to laugh.
Okay.
It's not what you're saying, Rhett. It's not what you're saying. I'm just laughing.
I'll cut that part out. Keep going.
All right.
This is so hard.
Christian just dropped it.
Okay. I just miss you so much, right? You know.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, you got me giggly, bitch.
What did I say, Rhett?
You're gonna cut this all out anyway. You're gonna cut it all out anyway.
I didn't want to, but I guess I have to.
So anyway, the paper starts out with the philosophers that kind of influence the paper and the snippets that I took from each of them. So the three were John Locke and his views on individualism, Hobbes's views on how people are naturally selfish and kind of need like a guiding hand. And the third, surprisingly, was like Karl Marx, because he said one thing that I could agree with. And I even made it a critical part of my paper to say that I don't agree with almost anything the man says, but he made one really good point, and that was the fact that a government always betrays its people. It is only a matter of time. And that plays into the later paper, because of the fact that I just talk about how all power corrupts and it's only a matter of time before it corrupts. So society should be built to basically be as stable as it possibly can before the tyranny like ingrains itself into the society and takes over for that time, because society usually works in a way where it's the natural cycle of things. I cannot remember the philosopher who came up with the cycle, but it's basically good men create good times, or no, strong men create good times, good times create weak people create bad times create strong men. And it's the constant cycle that goes over for about 20 years each, and it's just a matter of time before power corrupts everybody. And I also made that clear with my religious views as well, because of the fact that we're all fallen because of our original sin. We all fall short, and we all have some evil in our heart. So that's basically the first section in a nutshell. And I also talked about how the U.S. is kind of the best attempt at the best society we could possibly hope for, with the ideas like constitutionalism, individual rights such as the right to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, to defend oneself, to be secure in your papers and your property. But I also brought up the fact that I'm not a very big believer in the Supreme Court, because of the fact that it kind of deals with where your rights begin and end, but these rights are given to us by God, so it should not be up to a court of people who are human just like us, who have fallen from grace and need to be saved just the same as all of us. So any question? Yeah.
I'm gonna ask a question based on that last thing you just said.
Sure.
Because I don't know what I think about it, but with the Supreme Court, I see it less of like, well, no, I guess it is by definition, but so the Constitution is a list essentially of our God-given rights. That I honestly don't trust a lot of people to interpret it on their own. So what would you say should be in lieu of the Supreme Court?
Well, it's not okay.
Because what they're doing is they're interpreting the language of the Constitution essentially, with the different cases.
The issue is I'm trying to point out the shortcomings of the Supreme Court with previous cases, such as, what was it called? Where is it?
Roe v. Wade?
No, not Roe v. Wade.
That's a good one though. Yeah,
it is.
Your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I bet that child doesn't have any of those things. So
Korematsu v. United States, which was the case on Japanese internment camps, and basically how their rights were taken away overnight. And then basically the Supreme Court upheld that decision for imprisoning their own citizens, which is a shortcoming of the Supreme Court. So your question revolved more around what I would replace it with, or what would I? It's a very difficult question, because of the fact that I could understand why you would have a court there to actually deal with, if it actually dealt with infringing on the rights of the citizen or not. The problem I find with the actual Supreme Court, though, is the fact that they see where it starts and ends, where your rights start and end, such as what's called the National Firearms Act or something like that, where it limits the Second Amendment, or I'm trying to think of a Supreme Court case where it could limit the First Amendment. I can't point one out right now, but I'd love to give it back to you guys. The Supreme Court is a good concept in general, but I don't think it should deal with limiting or expanding upon the right that is given to us by God, because it is an individual right for each and every single one of us to have those rights, and it shouldn't be up for interpretation. I think the Supreme Court should deal with if a right was actually infringed upon, and should deal just solely with that. But I also brought up in my paper how it's been infected with, I like the little half smile, Connor.
Just keep going.
I also brought up how the Supreme Court over time has been infected by factional lines, such as Democrat policy, more Democrat running politicians, or Republican politicians injecting their own justices into the Supreme Court to rule on their behalf after basically they're gone, which I think should not be the goal of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is there to protect your rights and to show that basically these are your rights, and if they are infringed upon, they will be punished. Not be punished, but they will be upheld no matter what.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I agree with that because, well, there's a couple ways you could go with this, but our current administration would love to add a few seats, which is,
I think that's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but it's for the reason you just said. And instead of it being, okay, how are we going to interpret the Constitution just based on what we know and not being biased? Because when you see any gun related case goes to the Supreme Court, and sometimes we get lucky and they say it's unconstitutional, but a lot of times it's like, oh well, I don't agree with it, so I'm gonna vote no, or whatever they do. It's like, no, you're supposed to read the Second Amendment and then say, does this fit within it, not do I agree with it?
Exactly.
So that's just human error playing into it, and so I agree with you on that. But
okay,
yeah, kind of switching the topic a little bit, Rhett. What your entire, I guess, preface reminded me of that quote from Thomas Jefferson about the tree of liberty must be refreshed.
Yes.
With blood of patriots and tyrants. Not necessarily in the U.S. society, because like you said, I feel like we do a pretty good job here of, at least creating and pursuing peace for as long as possible. What do you feel about that quote in general, in terms of like, I guess, tyrannical leaders worldwide who oppress their citizens, and how do you think that how do you think that translates to your paper, I guess, or you may bring it up later. I'm not exactly sure what you have in there yet.
So in the second section of my paper, I bring up what the role of the citizen in the society is when dealing with a tyrant, and I say that they should be removed by any means necessary, whether that be by legal means or by violent means. If a tyrant is in an office of power and they are being a tyrant and you have exhausted your peaceful options, then you remove their power. And I kind of placated it back to the American Revolution again, because it's a very integral part of the paper. The Sons of Liberty and the Patriots exhausted a lot of their options before they went to full-blown revolution. I had a quote here somewhere.
Well, then I guess my second point of that would be just something to add on, would be if the people give governments and these tyrants, before they become tyrannical power, you can't get that back from them. Once you give a political party or a leader or somebody like that power, it's almost impossible for the people to get back. So I guess how in your paper, how would you combat something like that? Because if you think about like Kim Jong-un, for example, he has all the weapons, all the military, spies, whatever else that dude has. He has all the resources. How do we, I guess, quote unquote, refresh liberty and create that peaceful society that we strive for, even though we are fallen in a tyrannical rule, to, I guess, perpetuate peace, like you're saying, and like we want, Would
you be able to simplify that question a little bit, because it was a very long and detailed question? It's a good question. It's just, I think it'd be better if we split it up into little sections.
Okay. So for tyrants with power that the people give them, you can't get that power back. How does?
No, exactly.
So how does?
It's about, at that point, it is about resistance at any cost, and that could be through labor strikes. That could be through avoiding taxes, so the money does not end up going to a tyrannical ruler. It could be an armed revolt. But honestly, it's just about starting with civil disobedience. You look at something recent like the mask mandate, where you're basically forced to wear a mask where you walk into a store. It's about supporting what you believe. So you could go to a local business, if any of them are still open, and they may not ask you to wear a mask, and you'd support that business over some place like Target that would force you to wear a mask when you walk into their store. It's just about civil disobedience at that point. And if one person rises up, that inspires other people to rise up and get together. And that's the other thing. It's about finding people with common beliefs and talking about solutions to these problems, because the more you talk with others and the more you actually come together, the stronger you are. So instead of having one stick that could break very easily, you have plenty of sticks that's much harder to break, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense.
So yeah, so it's just about resisting them peacefully or even with violence if it comes down to it. Because if they come to your door and they ask you to basically come with them, it's the question of if you're actually going to go with them when you know you've done nothing wrong. You see?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Any other questions?
I have a question, and I'll go off the civil disobedience thing. I don't want to talk about
All right.
COVID that much, but you kind of have to.
Understandably.
Yeah. So with the whole, earlier you talked about power eventually corrupting. Totally agree with that. And it's just natural. But you see our government telling people, hey, wear a mask to slow the spread or whatever. And then, oh, well, now that you're wearing masks, oh, well, actually you have to get this vaccine that we magically got really quick, way quicker if you look historically. And our little side thing, people say that we got it quicker because we're more advanced. No, like yes, but still no. Like you can't become more advanced with testing what happens over time. How do you get more unless you can time travel, which almost positive we can't. But so then they say get the vaccine, and then so that way you don't have to wear a mask anymore. We can go back to normalcy or some shadow of normalcy. And then now you see all those liberal places. Look at LA County. And actually Sacramento County, like very, very left-leaning liberal places are now saying, well, actually, no, doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not, you still have to wear a mask. And so it's like you're taking away the one like incentive that people had. And like even our last guest, Thomas, he said that exact thing, I got it, so I can just be one of the 70% needed, which good for him. But it's still the whole idea that we do things because our politicians tell us to. They're just going to change their mind when their agenda changes, or when their agenda is not going the right way, so then they have to flip-flop it. But then going back to the civil disobedience thing, that's why I believe capitalism is, and that's why I believe it's so important that we remain a capitalist society, because you vote with your money. That's really like the best way to vote. You go into a store, they say wear a mask, or wear, you have to, I don't know, you do something stupid that you don't want to do, or they support charities that you don't support. Easy, turn around, leave, and go across the street to a different store. Like there's that's what's so nice about like a free market society. You have so many options, and it forces people to bring, Christian and I've talked about this many times, bring the best product to market and be the best company, just so that you get that one sale. That's what it's all about. Anyways,
it's pretty good. Yeah. But that's the whole thing with basically a whole nation shutting down again over the Delta variant. It's not going to stop after the Delta variant basically dies out again, because they're going to push another booster shot here coming up pretty quick. I could already see it. There's 4 places on that vaccine card for a reason. It's just going to go, it's going to keep going full circle. We gave the government way too much power during the initial stages of this, and everybody was afraid, so they traded their freedom for security, and now they don't get either. We're locking the country back down when cases are spiking, yes, but deaths are lower than they ever have been. I think DC just shut down, and the mayor, or the amount of deaths that happened in DC over the past couple of weeks, it's like two COVID deaths a week, something like that, and they're shutting back down. So it's just about how much power you really give to these politicians, and that's the other issue with our current system. We're not holding our politicians accountable for what they are actually doing to us. Everybody thinks, oh, you have to vote on party lines. You really don't have to vote on party lines. It's just about finding the candidate that you believe in, and if they're actually going to do something about it. That's why I like populist leaders more so than I like party oriented. This country was never supposed to function on a two-party system or any kind of party system. It was supposed to be representatives from across the United States coming in to settle their differences and basically create a more perfect union. That's not what we have now. Every single person in Congress right now, or at least the vast majority of Congress, is not working for your best interest. They're working for their own best interest. You look at politicians like Nancy Pelosi, who rolled into Congress worth, I believe it was $1 million, and now she's worth 120 million. It's corruption, it's extortion, and it's the process that, and the thought process that, oh, we're too civilized to basically punish these people in terrible ways. But you look back at 1776, they dragged people out in the streets, tar and feather them, and then parade them around town. It was embarrassing, but it was effective. And that's the sad thing with our society, because we think we're so much better than our ancestors when it comes to being civilized. Humanity is a brutal species. It is a very brutal species. It was built on war and conflict and struggle. And to think that our society is any different from our ancestors is completely and utterly wrong. At the end of the day, and this is a quote from Nietzsche, every animal instinctively strives for an optimum or favorable conditions under which it expends all its strength to achieve maximal feeling of power. Every animal abhors, just as instinctively, every kind of intrusion or hindrance that obstructs or could obstruct the path of the optimum of power. And that's for every single citizen. And when it comes down to the line in a survival situation, many people will focus on themselves. They'd like to think that they'd focus on the group and everybody else, but at the end of the day, they'd focus on themselves. You look at soldiers in a conflict where they are built up to be a team. They're built up to be a team, but that has to be instilled in each and every single one of them, because military commanders, generals, everything like that, they know that in a survival situation, they're going to worry about themselves more so than the team. So they have to instill that group mindset into their people, so they make sure that they can actually coherently work together. That's the thing with society. We're not soldiers, sadly. Not every single one of us is a soldier, but we are kind of part of a mass psychosis at this point, because it's just a constant cycle of, now with COVID, it's going to shut down because, oh, a new variant comes out. Oh no, something else gets pushed. Then it's going to be like, oh, we have this magical cure to solve all your problems, and then you get to go back to your normal life. It's the carrot on the stick. That's what the vaccine is. That's what all this is. Constantly going in a circle over and over and over again. And Stalin made a good point of this during his reign in Russia. He made an example out of a chicken. So he plucked a chicken of all its feathers. It was in great pain and everything. And then he threw a couple of what's called crumbs to it, and the chicken followed him around. And he said to his people, basically, as long as you give the people crumbs, they will follow you to the ends of the earth. And that's basically what we have right here. The vaccine is that crumb, in my opinion. That's what it is. And it's just about getting back to that normal life you had before, that better life where everything wasn't shut down, where people were in debt and being kicked out of their homes. And basically we're going into a recession and probably a depression after this. But it's just about breaking that cycle and saying enough is enough. If enough people are able to stand up to a tyrannical government or to a tyrannical leader, then that shows all the other leaders who are trying to push this that, okay, this might not work. That puts fear in their hearts. Fear is a very powerful tool. And if you have the control of the masses, then you could point them in whatever direction you want. Germany is a prime example of that. They blamed the Jews for everything bad in their lives, and then they ended up almost being exterminated. It's just about finding the group, finding a way to please the masses and convince the masses that you are the good guy. And if you're able to do that, then you're able to do whatever you want. And that's basically what we're in right now.
And to your point, Rhett, of holding elected leaders accountable, I also feel like us as a society, since we think we're so high and mighty and on the two-party system, that we don't hold ourselves accountable. We don't, most people, I'd probably, go out on a limb here to say most people don't research who they elect.
Oh no.
They don't.
Of course they don't.
Yeah, exactly. They don't research who they elect. They don't do, like, I guess, dig deep and find out what they actually want to do while they're in office. And that's why we have these issues, is that us as a society are lazy and dumb.
Oh yes. Very much so.
Exactly. We're lazy and dumb and don't want to actually put in the work to see what are these people going to do when you put them in office. You give them power, and then, I mean, it's like, you voted for them, don't vote for them next time if you didn't like what they did. If you like what they did, vote for them again. And I'm an even bigger believer in educating people about voting and, really digging deep into what issues are. But also, I feel like you can't complain if you don't vote.
Right? No, exactly.
That's a big one.
That it's a fantastic point. You have no right to complain, bitch, and moan about it because of the fact that you didn't put your voice out there in the first place to actually say, this is my opinion going. And you said in the beginning of your statement, our elected leaders. These people are not our leaders. They are our representatives, and people need to be reminded of that. Everybody thinks that they are directly our leaders. The president is our leader. The people in Congress are leaders. No, they're our representatives. And if they fail to represent us, that is why you vote them out. And that also brings up the second point in my paper, which is the role of the people in a society. And my main focus was saying that an educated population is the most dangerous thing to a tyrant, because if you are able to educate yourself and you know everything that's going on around you, and you're able to think critically and think, okay, how is this going to affect others? How is this going to affect me? Is this better for my constituents, or is this better for myself? It's just about educating yourself on politics, whether that be something like the Supreme Court, a bill that's going to be passed, and it's about putting the effort forth and calling your legislators and saying, I'm not okay with this, or I'm okay with this, pass it. And it's also about the education system we have, which is kind of an issue because of the fact that it's run by the state.
Right.
The state can mandate whatever they want at this point in time, coming off to what am I trying to say? Okay, so I'm basically saying that the state has the power to enforce whatever curriculum it wants on its people. And that's one of the reasons why our society has suffered so much, because you look at something like your parents' education, where they had car shop, they had home economics, they had a literal class just all about life. Those are gone, and now we're pushing political goals more so than useful items that will build useful and good citizens. The system we have right now and the curriculum we have right now is to basically make drones who can follow commands, fill in bubbles, be good workers, not good citizens. And that's why our society is suffering so much, because of the fact that nobody can take care of themselves. And that's, personally, by my opinion, that's by design, because they want you to be more reliant on the government than you are on yourself. Individualism is the best, and self-reliance is the best thing you could possibly do to fight a tyrant at this moment in time. If you are self-sufficient and you don't rely on anybody but yourself, that is the biggest stick to a government or tyrant across the world, because you're not able to be controlled as easily because of the fact that you're able to function by yourself. That's the thing with something like the shoot, what was it called? It's not Mortuum. Basically, a couple days ago, everybody who didn't pay their rent over COVID was booted. So that's that could be seen as a failure of our education system, because of the fact that we didn't teach our students how to actually take care of ourselves, how to provide for ourselves, and how to actually pay for rent, how to do taxes, how to do everything, especially during something like a pandemic or something along those lines. Finding a way to increase the optimum output of each and every single citizen to be a good citizen and not just a good worker is paramount to a free society. Sadly, we do not have that, in my opinion, in our current government and or society, because of the fact that the state controls that education. If you are able to change that in some way, granted, my thoughts are to push a constitution of education, basically. That's my big thought process that would fix a lot of these issues, because then the state wouldn't have to get involved, and you'd be focusing on the things that actually matter: how to do your taxes, how to take care of yourself, how to buy a home, how to build a family from the ground up. And until we're able to actually build those good citizens, I don't think our society is going to get any better. But that even placates into our society right now. We are probably the weakest generation this world has ever seen.
It's true.
No, it is true. It's definitely true. Nobody's willing to take responsibility, but it's just been time. We've become lazy over time because we've had it so good. Because
Right.
after World War II, our economy was completely fantastic. Our industry, fantastic. Everything, fantastic. But over time, as government became larger and more involved in everybody's lives, that's when you start to see that you can't own a house anymore on a single income and a couple of cars and provide for a family with a single income. That's just a system that has grown over time, and the reliance on big corporations rather than the smaller businesses has also grown to that level. And the fact that these private companies and institutions are able to censor opposing opinions, and such as we have seen with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all these new news sites, they're just censoring entire factions. So you look at our society now and everything is political, it's polarized. It's about getting away from that. And it's about actually holding people accountable, simplifying life so that it is easier, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, well, there's two things. So you talked about crumbs, way back
Yes.
to that. I honestly think, okay, well, so I sent a video to Christian actually this morning that I watched. That was hilarious, because it was basically a guy going around, I think it was Nashville, and he basically said, how do you think Biden's doing? And, rate him 1 to 10, whatever. You could pretty much draw direct correlation with age on what they would say. The older people said he's doing terrible, The younger people were like, oh, he's doing great. And he was like, oh, okay, well, someone gave him like a 7.5 out of 10. And he's like, okay, well, why? And they were like, oh, well, the stimulus check. And it's like, okay, so you like him because he gave you money. Okay, there's one reason. And then another person said, oh, well, free college, like who doesn't want that? And it's like, okay, you like him because he's giving you money again. Okay, so it's the same reason, but two different versions. To me, those are the crumbs. Those are them literally like dragging feeble-minded people along with them, just saying, here you go, here's a little check. Oh, you need here's another little check, rather than exactly what you were saying, because I completely agree. Home ec needs to be, how you take, like, I think one of the most useful classes, I think we can all agree, it was government / economics. My school split it up into 2 semesters. They need to do the same thing with home ec. You need to learn how to do your taxes. You need to learn about credit. You need to learn about, college applications, which I know some schools have you do that sort of, but not like in a class setting. But just life skills in general, because nobody understands. And like, I find all sorts of people in college, credit was a big thing for me to work towards, because it's like, I want a house one day. I want to, if you want a car and not have to buy it using cash, credit's important, and using it as a tool is like really important, but nobody knows about it. Like, I talk to people about it and they're like, oh, I didn't know it was like that. And it's like, nobody does. And it just proves to me that, like, how, like you said, how like weak people are, and like how small-minded, like they don't think about these things. They're literally just like, oh, life's good, okay, I'm just gonna chill.
They're focused on worldly things,
right? Yeah,
that's all it is.
I'm not going to strive to be better because it's good where I'm at, and that brings me back to what you said about World War II. I watched Hacksaw Ridge yesterday for the first time. First off, great movie. Started out a little weird, but in general, good movie.
I told you it got better.
Yeah, you see the people in that movie, and it's like, no one is like that nowadays. No, like the main guy, I forgot his name, I should know, literally praying like, oh, help me get one more guy, when you saw that super muscular dude literally hiding, scared out of his mind, couldn't even protect himself, when this other guy, without a weapon, that's a completely different topic, but going in, and he got like, what was it, 75 people or something in one night, all by himself, no help. So it's like, no one's like that. All what we would do is literally, someone starts shooting at us and we would jump off the ridge, like, no, get us out of here, like I'm out, and just nobody stands up for themselves. No one understands that, like, I don't think like violence is necessary, but I do think sometimes, and a lot of people are like, oh, we shouldn't use violence, and it's like, you are so naive, like, it's like, you're going to have to at some point. Someone comes in your house, we can talk them down. Oh, excuse me, sir, can you please leave? That's not gonna work. That's literally not gonna work. So yeah, we're weak. It's the main idea. Everyone in our
exactly,
generation is
and
weak.
it's about creating or building yourself to be a stronger person, whether that be mentally or physically. Physically is a very good way to increase your mental stability. Lifting weights and making healthy life choices can change your life so quickly, and it completely changes your mindset, because maybe before you just didn't feel very confident, you didn't feel good about yourself because of the fact that you're a weaker human being at that point. But as you build yourself up and you start to see results and you gain that confidence, you're able to be stronger in that regard, because you're willing to take more risks if you're more confident in yourself. Now, there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Arrogance is just ignorant confidence at that point.
Right.
Being humble is a big part of being confident as well. And I feel that the more humble you are and the more confident you are, the more of a threat you are to a tyrant or an institution that you're not really a fan of. It's just
to that point, Rhett. Well, I totally agree with working out and having some sort of outdoor physical mental activity. I mean, why do you think old people do like crossword puzzles and stuff like that? It's to keep their mind sharp, like
they can't pick up anything heavier.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, things like that are so important, and bettering ourselves is also like the root cause of that. Is that why do we want to go to the gym and look buff? Because we want to feel confident. Why do we want to feel confident? So we can go do whatever we want, and like you said, in a humble way, where you're confident that you can do a job well, instead of I can fly, I'm an arrogant piece of trash. So my point to that is that I think today's people, why we're so weak, is that we're normalizing everything,
definitely
taking away consequences for people's actions. Oh, you're a little bit, you're morbidly obese. Well, let's normalize being obese, and it's healthy for them. They're okay with it. Instead of, hey, that's not a healthy lifestyle. Let's push you towards something better.
Well, that's the burden of something like the internet, because of the fact that it gives every idiot out there a platform. So therefore those ideas reach people who don't really know much on the subject, and they're like, right. Oh, that makes sense, so I might as well believe in it and fight for it. But that's the other thing too. The internet and the normalization of just in normalities at this point is rampant through everything, and it's being pushed by every single major institution. You look at the media basically being folded in with the United States government, pushing whatever narrative needs to be pushed for seemingly one side. And of course, I am talking about the Democrats and the correlation between them and places like MSNBC, CNN, all the other CBS, I guess, Fox News, even Fox News.
They all suck.
They really do. Nationalized news is always a big part of a tyranny. Hitler did it, and he used it to basically unperson the Jews. Mao's China did it as well, and he did it for those who weren't fully communist. And in both those instances, even Stalin did it as well. The news is a tool for tyranny. It should be used to actually give you information such, and that's why I believe there should be more regulations on news networks and private platforms, because of the fact that they don't seem to adhere to the same rules that we do when it comes to speaking on certain subjects. Like, even looking at something like a headline can be completely different from what happened, but it's about controlling the language and controlling every single little aspect, because they're trying to make it so, or at least in my opinion, those in power are trying to get you to a point where you are so weak that you have to rely on the collective opinion of everybody else. And that's kind of what social media is. It's like the pat on the back. I patted my head, but the pat on the back and such for all your hard work, I guess. And it's just feeding ego. It's trying to feel special in a world where it's very, very hard to be special. And they're trying to destroy all the things that were normal, because basically at this point, it's a new world that's trying to be pushed and built, where everybody can be their special little selves and not really affect anything. So nobody can agree on anything. So therefore they can't unite together to defeat something that's affecting them all.
Agreed.
Any other questions?
Did you talk? What did you already go into the second aspect? I remember you said, "Oh, that brings me into the second point." Was that the second?
Yeah, that was the second point. That was basically me talking about how education affects society and how basically weak we are. I also brought up an opinion that's kind of unpopular, that because Machiavelli wrote a book for rulers back in the day. He wrote The Prince, and it was basically a guide for, a prince to rule. It was a guide for how he should rule if he can't be loved, this or that. But I personally see it now, since we don't live in a world of princes anymore, princes, kings, and queens, grand other than the British monarchy, but they don't mean anything. Machiavelli's book, The Prince, is a guide now to show us the signs of a tyrant and how they work. So it's basically that insider knowledge on how somebody in power may be able to think. So with that in mind, you'd be able to use that as a tool against tyranny, if that makes sense.
Good.
So
Good.
Yeah. Oh, okay.